For today's class period, you are going to be spending some time getting introduced to the idea of cellular respiration. You can see from this video that the essential ideas are that cellular respiration supplies energy for the functions of life. Energy is converted to a usable form during cellular respiration. So for today's agenda, you should have already watched a video review of photosynthesis. And so this particular video will give you an introduction to cellular respiration, and you will have some time to work on some of the things that we've been working on so far. So objectives for today, you should be able to describe the reactions of photosynthesis in even more detail than we did last week, and you should be able to explain how redox reactions relate to cellular respiration. In addition to that, you'll be working on some diagramming of chloroplasts and mitochondria. So this is the video that you should have watched already. Be sure to watch this, pause it often, compare what you're seeing here to the notes that we took last week. And then when you're finished with that, make sure you go back into your photosynthesis KWL charts and complete the L column, writing answers to the questions that you wrote in the W column, and make sure that you resubmit on Canvas. So last week we learned that the ultimate goal of photosynthesis was to convert light or solar energy into chemical energy. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about what chemical energy actually is, but it's basically the energy that is contained within covalent bonds of molecules. The most common form of chemical energy generated from photosynthesis is generally glucose or G3P molecules, which are then used to make glucose. But this is not the most common form or most usable form of chemical energy for cells, which we should know already at this point is ATP. So therefore, the ultimate goal of cellular respiration is going to be to convert the energy that's stored in the chemical bonds of glucose to chemical bonds of ATP, so that it is a more readily usable source of energy for cells. One common misconception about cellular respiration is that it only occurs in heterotrophic or consumer cells. In actuality, it occurs in every cell. We're going to be looking specifically at aerobic cellular respiration, and as we take a look at this equation, we should note that it is basically the opposite of the equation, or the reduced form of this photosynthesis equation that we've looked at earlier. This whole process is going to occur through a series of controlled redox or oxidation-reduction reactions. So we want to go back and review redox reactions again. At this point in time, you should pause this video and see if you can fill in this chart based on your understanding of redox reactions from our study of photosynthesis. So just to review, oxidation, we generally refer to that as a loss of electrons. There are multiple other ways in which we can define oxidation, including gain of oxygen or loss of hydrogen. Reduction is just the opposite then. It's a gain of electrons or loss of oxygen and gain of hydrogen. We've looked at this diagram already. Redox reactions always occur together. One substance is oxidized or loses electrons while the other is reduced or gains those electrons. Looking at the overall cellular respiration equation, we can see that glucose is going to lose hydrogen atoms and be oxidized. Oxygen will gain hydrogen atoms and be reduced. So what does this all have to do with cells? Organic molecules, such as those glucose, ATP, and so on, contain energy in their molecular bonds. Cells can break down these nutrients by way of slow oxidation so that they can gradually release the energy that is held within those bonds. These are generally enzyme-catalyzed reactions. They break the covalent bonds and they release the energy. The point of doing it through redox reactions is to do it slowly so as to capture the energy and put it into the molecules of ATP. We're going to see a number of different molecules in cellular respiration that are going to be involved in electron transfers in cells. One of these is going to be oxygen. Another will be NAD+, which is very similar to the NADPH molecule that we looked at in photosynthesis. FAD, and another electron transport chain. The order of electrons will go from glucose, the glucose produced through photosynthetic reactions, to NADH or FADH2, to an electron transport chain, and then finally the ultimate electron acceptor will be oxygen. If we take a look at this diagram, we can see that hydrogen and oxygen react together naturally. However, if it's uncontrolled, it involves an explosive release of heat and light energy. That would be considered an uncontrolled reaction. That is not what we want within cells. So if we look at the second diagram, it's the same process of combining hydrogen and oxygen. However, this time we are passing electrons through a controlled series of redox reactions, and eventually oxygen will be capturing those electrons. With each transfer of electrons, a tiny bit of energy is released instead of an explosive amount of energy. This tiny bit of energy that is released can then be used to synthesize ATP, which is the ultimate goal of cellular respiration again. All of this process, or I shouldn't say all of this process, the majority of this process happens in the mitochondria. The beginning stages of cellular respiration actually happen in the cytoplasm. The final stages happen in the mitochondria. So one of the things that you're going to be working on is a diagram of a mitochondrion. This is very similar to the assignment that you're already working on with the chloroplast illustration. So I'm going to show you several pictures on the next few slides of mitochondria that you could choose to use as you're working on this illustration assignment. Okay, so this is just a generalized picture of a mitochondrion. You can see some of the things that you'll need to include in your diagram. Like the chloroplast, there are two membranes, only in this case the inner membrane is folded to create lots of surface area inside of the mitochondrion. We have a matrix, which is a gel-like substance, almost like cytoplasm, on the inside of the mitochondrion. You have your cristae, which are, you can see the folds that are created there by the infolding of the inner membrane. And then you have the inner membrane space, which isn't labeled on here, but would be the space between the two membranes. Okay, here's another illustration of a mitochondrion, another illustration showing the inner membrane in more detail. Here's an electron micrograph of a mitochondrion and a scanning electron micrograph of a mitochondrion. So for today's class time, there's a list of things that you should be working on. Finish your KWL chart. Then you will want to complete the photosynthesis practice quiz. This is just practice. It's a formative assessment to give you an idea of what types of questions you should be prepared for. Then work on your chloroplast and mitochondrion illustrations. And if you still have time at the end of the period, you should work on the assignment for Thursday, Friday. And you can see, just like the one with photosynthesis, there are a variety of options. This one, it's extremely important that you actually take notes because that will be part of the activity that you're going to be doing in class on Thursday, Friday. I also like to say that there is a video to give you some instructions about the chloroplast and mitochondrion illustrations that you might want to take a look at also.